welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. We're in my sewing corner. Today I am kicking off a sewing project with you guys, and I'm excited about this one. I've let myself pull a fabric from a recent fabric haul out right away to make it up into a dress, and the fabric I am most excited about from that haul is this guy here, which is this really gorgeous vintage cotton that has like little clover flowers on it. They're like purple and cute. From what I can tell, it's all 3-leaf clovers. Nothing particularly lucky about this fabric, but it is so stinking cute. And to go with this really cute fabric, I chose a pattern of a similar area with this Hollywood pattern. This is Hollywood 1698. I'm going to do version 2. I was just checking the fabric to make sure I actually have enough. I don't have a ton of this fabric. I think this will be really cute, and I wanted to do something relatively simple. I'm not saying this is the simplest thing I could make, but it feels pretty straightforward, except for, of course, I will have to figure out this banding. We'll see where I land there, but I'm pretty excited because this has definitely been on my to make list. Both this fabric and this pattern I felt pretty excited about because I love that kind of like extra special keyhole neckline, and I suspect this will also have like, it'll just be really cute on my shoulders with the little flouncy shoulder things. So pretty excited about this project. I am gonna say I am having quite the chronic pain flare up right now, so it might take me a while to get to, even though it's such a simple project. But my plan is I'm gonna take a couple days to not sew and really minimize the things that stress out my pain, and then actually dig into this guy. I just wanted to film this intro while I was looking like this and not like I had been lying in bed for a few days. So I will hopefully be able to kick this one off soon. Let's dive into it. So for this project, cutting out everything was pretty straightforward, except for the fact that I was working on vintage fabric, which means it was only 36 inches wide, which isn't that wide. Most modern day fabrics are around 44 minimum, up to 60. So I did have to just be really intentional about how I was laying out my pattern, and I did actually look at the pattern layouts, which I don't always do. I disagreed with them like usual, so I just cut my own way. However, this was a little bit risky, and I did go down to the very end of this fabric, which is not necessarily the most typical for me to do in projects. In a lot of projects I have anywhere from a half to a full yard left over because I just tend to go on the cautious side, but on this project I had 0 left over. And as always, this is where I'm going to give my Patreon plug. I do have a Patreon and a Ko-Fi where you can go over and support me monthly. You get early access to videos and a little card with an illustration of me and Spooky sent to you in the mail. So if that sounds interesting to you, pop over in my links in the description. But we're going to continue on with this project. Also, casual side note, if you hear construction in the background of this, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. It's been 4 or 5 hours of this noise, so I just decided I have to move about my day and risk you guys hearing it because I need to get this recorded so I can get this video out. But what I'm doing here is I am cutting out all the black pieces. These are all of the little like banding details and accents I'm just using. I have some black Kona cotton that just chills in my stash at all point in times. So I brought it out, ironed it, and I'm cutting out the band pieces as well as some facings that, spoiler alert, I didn't need to cut out and didn't end up using. I hate it when it happens, but sometimes, no matter how many times I read instructions, I still don't know what I'm doing. And, like always, we are starting with dart. I'm going to mark them, I'm going to pin them. We have 2 in front, and we have 2 in the back. So, we're going to get all these darts going. And the way I like to finish my darts is by tying off the edges. There are lots of ways you can do this, but this is my preferred way. I also kind of just like tying knots. And because I cut that back piece so there would be a zipper opening up the back, I am now putting in the basting stitches to close this up so that way it will be back to one piece and will operate as usual in the instructions because I can cut this open later. And then I'm going to pin the shoulder seams and side seams together, getting these all prepped and ready to sew. Before pinking them and pressing them open, I should make sure these shears are in my sewing list. I hated using pinking shears before, but once I got these Kai ones and they don't hurt my hands and they're really smooth, I am now a huge fan of pinking. So I'll make sure those are linked, but I do want to decide I've now had these for 4 months and I've really liked them, and I've hated all the other pinking shears I've ever tried. So just throwing in a little plug. Since I will likely use Amazon to link them, there will be a kickback for me, so full transparency, but I do genuinely really love using these scissors. And for people who just have hand stuff like me, I like to recommend things that will hopefully make sewing a little bit easier for you. And now it's time to work on the banding that's gonna like be that black accent on this piece. So basically you're making 3 darts on a like almost, I guess it's not technically a bias cut because it's cut on the grain, but it's just really interesting to make 3 darts on such a like skinny thing, but that's what you're doing first. Here they want to make sure you're reducing your bulk, so I am cutting open that dart so I can press it flat in just a few seconds. I also pinned on and sewed the rest of the piece here, so you can see the neckline shape kind of shaping up here. It's still pretty abstracted, and honestly, me too. I also was like, what? This is gonna do this, but it is working, so we're continuing along. So back when I cut this out, I marked this little diamond shape, and so they want you to cut this diamond shape kind of out. This was a little bit nerve-wracking. I don't know why I keep choosing all these wild cutting pieces recently, but I was just gonna kind of freehand it, but then I realized I should really draw the lines in between and just follow the lines because I can check that this looks quite symmetrical before I cut. So I did the smart thing and I traced it before cutting out that triangle. And then once that diamond is cut open, I am now matching the facing, matching all the marks and notches and things to hopefully make this go on successfully. There are a lot of ways I would do this differently if I was to do it again. The biggest thing that I will note, you needed to basically, where there's these seams, you needed to turn there to get your like facing. This is essentially like an outward facing or an outward binding to look really, really clean, and I didn't quite know what I was doing here. So I was just kind of pinning and prepping it to sew without doing that. But basically everywhere there's a seam or those little darts that I put in, that's like a corner. And it's helpful if you sew along that corner and use those corners as corners. It would have given me a cleaner finish. I'm still more than happy, especially with this being black where the seams aren't as visible. I'm still happy with how this turned out, but it was a little bit weird. This is after I sewed it, and again, because it's black, I don't feel like you can see all the mistakes I made in not turning those corners where those seams were, but I'm now going to clip my corners and get this ready to like press and turn over. Part of me was like, do you understitch this? But it's too curvy to understitch. I don't know, this was just definitely a very different feeling process for me, and I actually enjoyed that it was so different. Even if I'm like maybe not 100% happy with the results, the fact that I could take on a task this challenging and tackle it with like pretty good success is a really exciting thing in a sewing journey. Once I tackled all the clipping, I started the pressing it out. So this is where the black was, I guess, like a not as handy thing, is that you could see anytime, like I had to be so mindful about trying to press the black so you wouldn't be able to see that like clover pattern fabric edge on the edges of this garment. So that kind of drove me a little bit crazy, but I feel like I'm doing pretty good here, and I'm using my ham to just really help with those curves, and I'm choosing to press this and not kind of freestyle it because I've just learned that especially when it's going to be on the front, it needs to not be done in kind of a wild freewheeling way. The diamond part is where I noticed the most that I wasn't precise enough with my sewing and turning those corners on the seams, because the reason you did those little darts was so that way you could get really clean turn-ins on this. And overall I just had kind of a hard time, I feel like, keeping the binding like even all the way around, so I think it's a little bit uneven. Again, I'm more than happy with how I turned out, and because it's such a dark black, you can't notice a lot of my sewing and pressing errors, but they are there and are definitely something I would do, not like necessarily differently, but just I would say in a more practiced manner if I was to do this again. And then with those all pressed and pinned, I am going to top stitch down the edge, staying as close to the edge as possible without going over it. And after sewing the edge down, they do have you go back up and around the top to stitch that down. In theory, I feel like it's unnecessary, but because of the black and the print showing so much where the black didn't overhang it properly, I went ahead and I did top stitch that part, even though normally I probably wouldn't. And now we're moving on to the sleeves and doing the exact same process. Because of the way the sleeves look, this will hopefully be more visual. So we're basically pinning wrong side to right side, which since this black is the same color on both sides, that doesn't matter, but that is what is happening here. And then after sewing it, I'm again clipping all my curves, and then I'll flip the binding back to the outside and fold that over, and that hides all the raw edges, which is why you kind of sew that like right side to wrong side in the first place, even though usually that is not how you do garments. It makes sense in this case. And then I am repeating that top stitching treatment. Here you can see me flipping around and doing that again to that like edge of the sleeve. It was extra easy for these because I knew the edges would be in a seam somewhere, so I didn't have to worry too much about where I like actually flipped around and did the whole rectangle thing. And then I am going to put in the gathering stitches so I can have the sleeve eased in easier. The instructions didn't mention these, but I've been sewing long enough to know that it's a lot easier when you do have them. And then I'm easing these really carefully, matching all notches and marks and things. These actually ease in perfectly, so there shouldn't be, in theory, like any pleats or gathers. And this is like a little flutter sleeve, so you can't see this very clearly, but what I'm doing in the part where there is no sleeve to finish it, it instructs you to put in a bias tape to finish those like seams. And then like usual, in the parts of the sleeve seams that are not going to be covered by bias tape, I am putting in a rayon binding on those edges so that way they won't fray. And now it's time to work on the 8 gore skirt. So I'm just going to be up and down, sewing everything here together and then pressing it open, pinking it, doing all that things. This is just always an exercise in doing the most. And it's good because it gets me up and down and like less hunched over my sewing machine. And I left it so the last panels I would be sewing up would be the back panels. That way I can evaluate how far down I need to mark for my zipper. With the skirt and the top done, except for the back seam, it is time to work on the like little belt triangle thing. So first I'm just sewing those little tiny itty bitty side seams. And then once those are pressed open and pinked, I am now focusing on pressing over the rest of the belt pretty evenly, and again making sure to press it well to make sure that it all just like rolls correctly and is even and looks nice before I start pinning everything to it. I'm first pinning the skirt to the top of this, matching all my notches again, making sure everything's looking really good. I first pin from the back, but since also for the top, I'll then repin it on the top, take the pins out the back before getting to my machine. There is so much fabric here, it is hard for you to see what is going on, but I'm just sewing down and around the belt using the smallest seam allowance possible for the edging. But yeah, this is a lot of fabric that I am maneuvering around. And then once that's done, I'm pinning on the top and doing the exact same thing. Back when I was using my old pinking shears, I just felt like I had to be so forceful with. I didn't like finishing these types of seams because I was always worried I would put a hole in the thing. But because these work so smoothly, I always now pink this kind of like top stitched seam situation. That way I can make sure I have clean edges that aren't gonna fray. And now I get to pop in the zip, just going down and around. I like to do a kind of one-sided placket method as opposed to straight down the middle of the zipper. Everybody kind of does their zippers differently depending on what works for you, and this is what works for me. With the zipper in, I could then try on the dress and evaluate the hem and get that all set up with both a clean edge and then basting stitches so I can ease in the skirt edge, since I am hemming it not a lot but enough that I definitely needed the ability to ease in that top bit of the skirt hem. And from there I'm just going to hand stitch the hem using a like slip stitch or blind stitch or whatever you want to call it. These are usually pretty invisible, and the biggest reason I do hand hem is because I prefer the look of a really clean hem as opposed to like a double turn hem, which are absolutely fine and a valid way to finish things. They just are not my preferred way to finish hems. This gives you a lot more wiggle room for if you want to lengthen it later. And now I'm doing the finishing touches, including sewing down the zipper ends and sewing in my label. I am so excited to show you this dress over in the reveal. All right, you have seen the reveal for this one. I hope you enjoyed. As always, we're gonna head straight into the cost breakdown. So for this dress, the most expensive component, hands down, was the fabric, because it was genuine vintage 1940s, 1950s cotton. So that was $71.81. I approximated about $5 for the black I had to use, which is probably a little high, but better high than low when it comes to these. So that is $76.81. For notions, I just needed thread and a zipper. It's about as easy as it comes, and that would then cost me $2.53. And for the pattern, I got this. I searched for Hollywood patterns a lot, and every once in a while you get lucky and one will pop up. That's pretty cheap, and this one was one. I only paid $4.56 on it. So that brings us to a supply total of $83.90. I think this is a fabulous dress for that price. At that price, you're looking at mid-tier cost, mid-tier brands, you know. So I think I feel pretty good about that. In general, I like to keep my prices at mid-tier for what I personally pay for making the garment. Alrighty, so now we'll jump into the labor portion of this video. So for cutting out the fabric, that took me 1 hour and 15 minutes about. Sewing, 5 hours, and hand sewing about 45 minutes. So this was actually a really fast garment, coming in at about 7 hours of work. To be fair, I tried to make it pretty much as fast as possible for a lot of reasons. One being my chronic pain. I was just kind of trying to get through, so I definitely took some shortcuts for filming that I wouldn't have normally taken. But as always, we talk about a living wage here on this channel, and to highlight a living wage, I'm not going to have exact calculations, but 7 hours is about a working day. So recently, let me bring it up, Atmos published an article called A Day in the Life of the Fast Fashion Worker. I will link this article down below. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the reality of these people's lives. This article focuses on a person named Robin who was offered a job that was going to be like a computer office job, where he traveled from his hometown in Bangladesh to Malaysia. And to even get this job, he was required to pay $3,400 US. That's 2 months rent for me. So that's a lot of money to pay to even get this job. Once he got the job, he had his passport confiscated. So this is a huge, huge thing that happens among garment workers, where the factory will actually take their ability to leave away from them. And this is human trafficking. Let's call it what it is. This is not a business. If you are not able to leave, that is human trafficking, and that is a condition in factories. This factory is a third-party factory, which often the way third-party factories work, sorry, this is very, very in the weeds, but the way these factories work is say you are a brand, you contract with a factory, and maybe you're trying to have some actual good practices. So you're gonna go look at that factory and see the working conditions with your own eyes. You're then gonna get back, you're deciding everything there looks generally fine, and then you are going to negotiate with that factory to produce your things. And a lot of times you want them faster and cheaper than that factory can handle. So what that factory does is they go and they hire a second factory, often where the working conditions are really, really bad, to help complete the order. So this lets a brand have plausible deniability, because even though they know they're giving prices that this factory can't meet, or production times this factory can't meet, technically they don't know that this factory is then subcontracting to third-party factory that has abusive human trafficking labor practices. So this is really common, and this is a loophole brands use to claim that they don't know about the human trafficking happening in their factories. If they really wanted to know, they would, you know? They just choose to not look into it. Once he got there, he was shown his workstation, which was an iron chair with thin padding, a work table, a water bottle, a collection of threads, and an electric sewing machine. No computer, no office equipment. And his accommodation to be supplied where he was living by his employer was a room of 30 bunk beds. So his supervisor would scream at him because he didn't know how to operate the sewing machine and was making mistakes, as I think most of us, I mean, maybe not people on this channel, would if we were given a machine to operate that we didn't know what we were doing. They go through a day in his life. I'm just gonna hit the highlights, aka the lowlights. At 6 a.m., he wakes up in the hostel. 180 people are usually forced to share 10 toilets. So that's 18 person a toilet in the morning, and they have to get to their shift in time, otherwise their wages are deducted. They then have to buy their breakfast from the company, and the food is expensive and low quality. Bathroom breaks, you're only allowed 5 minutes. even though the bathroom is a 4-minute walk. And if you exceed 5 minutes, you get yelled at, you don't get water break, you aren't allowed to get up from your chair. This worker reported being actually hit by their supervisors. They are told that to get their passport back, they have to pay the equivalent of $700 US, which is crazy because these people are making maybe $9 to $15 a day from the shift. So that is a really, really long amount of work. Like this is forced labor. This man cannot leave this job until he pays the company $700 to get his passport back. He's also talking about how he's been sewing for over 4 hours with no break and his body is starting to feel numb. So if they get injured, which this factory doesn't have safety precautions, you do have a mask, but you don't have needle guards. So if you are injured, you have to pay it out of your own pockets, and that continues to enslave you to this factory. This is by design to make it so you can't leave. You don't have the mental space to leave. You're exhausted. Your body's hurting. We're gonna pretend that my dress was a day's work. Again, this is not a one-to-one comparison. It's like important to talk about and compare and talk about hours. And I was able to get up and down and take breaks and do all that while sewing this, obviously, because I am by myself. But like, we have to talk about this. Sometimes I just feel like there's this like thing that like people who want to talk about a living wage are all holier than thou and blah, 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 blah. Again, this man needs to pay $700 to get his passport back to leave. And he maybe makes $15 a day, and there's all sorts of way they deduct from your pay. How are you going to escape that situation? Like if you are in that situation, how are you actually going to escape that situation? You can't, because you're worn down, you're hurt, and if you go to the doctor, it puts you even further into that debt and makes you unable to leave. So if we take that 7-hour workday, and we're gonna put it at the $9 range because that's a short workday, $83.90 plus 9 under this slave wage. Let's be honest, that's what it is. $92.90 for me to produce this garment. Now, when we talk about a living wage, this is hard to compare because obviously the living wage in Malaysia is very different than the living wage here in Seattle. The living wage here in Seattle is $35.39 an hour. So as a result, my labor total is $247.73, and that would bring me to a total of $331.63 if I were paid a living wage. Again, this is not a one-to-one comparison. I trust you all to use your critical thinking skills, but I just want us to actually talk about the conditions these workers are in. There's kind of this resistance to the idea that we shouldn't buy fast fashion because we are also financially not doing well as a country. Like, let's be honest. This country's not doing well. More and more people are falling into poverty. I can't abide the using this as an excuse to put people in other countries in slavery. If you sew, you understand how physically grueling sewing is. Like if you're actually sitting at a machine and putting something through it, he was talking about he was making bra cups. If you're actually sitting there putting something through that machine over and over again, you will know how grueling this is on your body. Like sewing is pretty hard on my body, but I'm up and down, up and down. I get up, I stretch, I walk, I take a walk along the block. I do things to try to like mitigate the stress it puts on my body, but like they can't do that. It breaks my heart. And like, I'm not saying that poverty isn't bad here. I'm not saying that's not an issue. I'm just saying like, if you can afford to not support these companies, you should. To be clear, like if you are buying the occasional Shein thing to get by, I am not condemning that. I am specifically talking about if you are hauling over $100, $150 worth of clothing every month from these fast fashion companies, that is a huge problem. And you are really supporting this. That's how they're making their profits. They're not making their profits off the poor. They're making their profits off of the middle class. I just want us all to be cognizant about the type of conditions we're talking about. We're talking, again, conditions where they do not have their passports. They cannot leave. That's just like, that's really serious, and that is human trafficking. That's considered human trafficking here in the States. I would say probably internationally that's considered human trafficking. And I just want people to really think about that before you purchase that ultra cheap thing that you're gonna wear once or twice and then dispose of. That ultra cheap thing that somebody's labor and pain, literal pain, went into. Because I do, like anybody, I am not perfect. I do buy fast fashion specifically for my undergarments. When I do, I'm going to make sure I'm going to wear that thing for years. I do not buy anything from fast fashion that I will not be keeping for a very, very, very long time to honor the person who made it work, and also to not give any more money to that company that I bought it from. So yeah, it's serious, and I want us to talk about it, and I want us to think about it. I don't know, if you're not being human trafficked, like, can you really compare your work situation to that? Again, with like the debt system, I know it's all really super complicated and it's more complicated by that, but like at the end of the day, I just don't think any of us want to be supporting slavery. So like that was just like really serious, and I don't really super know how to pivot, but I did find my usual comparisons. To the bottom of the barrel brands, these are the brands that are going to have conditions or demanding conditions that cause factories to do this. I found something for $27. That was a cotton poly blend. Again, I go for things as close as I can get. I can't get anything very exact because these are patterns from the 1940s. So $27 at a mid-tier. We're talking $109 and polyester. So at $109, you could actually probably pay your workers a living wage, but trust me, these brands are not. Unless these brands are actively like monitoring their factories and not turning a blind eye, they are not actually, probably those mid-tier brands are not going to be paying a living wage. And I feel like that is very showable by this slow fashion brand that I found at $135 instead of that $109. You can be ensured that you are not supporting slavery because of the way they monitor their factories and work with their factories. $135, that's what, $25 more. And that will also get you viscose, which is slightly more breathable than polyester. But yeah, that was like ultra serious, and I don't quite know how to pivot to my dress. But I do ask, please, if you have not read a ton about what fast fashion workers go through, go read that article and understand that this article is actually somebody in a better position than a lot of the other day in the life of fast fashion workers that I have read because of the 8 to about 7 o'clock work. I have read many articles where they're working more like 15, 16-hour days and they are not having any lunch breaks. So know that like this read that you're gonna take, this read is somebody who's in a better position than a lot of garment workers, which says really, really bad things for the fashion industry. But anyway, pivoting to my project, I have the dress here and I absolutely love it. She's so cute. Thoughts on this project. So when I first put this dress on, I actually hated it. I thought this dress just like didn't look good on me at all. Sometimes this happens when you sew and you start a project for so long and you like maybe have some perception of what it's gonna look like in your brain. This I did not feel like looks like that. However, once I put it away, slept on it, took it out for the reveal and saw the photos and how good it looked on me, and then also wearing it in office today, I felt really cute in this dress. I have forgiven this dress and decided I do actually look like it. I don't know if it's just because you spend so much time looking at something or what exactly it is, but sometimes when you make something, or maybe the pattern art has a certain view on you or whatever, but sometimes there's just a little bit of disconnect from what you make and if you're gonna like it. I guess point out its biggest flaws for me. So the biggest reason I put it on and I didn't like it is this band here. So this band, I kind of expected it to like go under bust, but this band like is squarely all stomach, and I think I just had this vision that the band, the little, you can't see it in this pattern, which is this dress's saving grace. If I had done this in a contrasting color, I think I would absolutely hated this garment. I think the reason when I first put this garment on and I didn't like it is I felt like it made my torso look really, really long. And I'm somebody who, I like to not have much of my body form on display. I like things to just kind of crop at like a very high waist and then everything under that very high waist to be mystery. So I just like wasn't prepared. This is not a bodycon dress, to be clear, but it felt like a bodycon dress to me. I felt like I was back in a bodycon dress from like the 2010s, which is very silly, but it's I've gotten just so used to these very like puffy silhouettes on me. So I think that's why I initially didn't like it. Continuing the critique of the dress, I do find these guys here, they're kind of pokey and kind of irritating, and I don't love that. It wasn't as bad as I thought when I first tried it on. I was like, these are gonna annoy me. But then I wore it for the work day, and I decided I was okay with it. So everything is looking up for this dress. I'm feeling like I was maybe just a bit dramatic when I first put it on. And then the last thing, which you'll see in the reveal, is there is not enough room in the butt for me here. I do forget with 1940s silhouette, there's a flare, and the flare works in the front, but I just need a little bit, like maybe an extra 2 inches in the back to really make it work. So that's something I'm going to try to remember for the next few projects I do, which means I'll have to learn how to fix that. But I think, like, if I was to summarize, I think that's all my issues with this. I think it's all kind of silly stuff. Like I said, I put it on the first time, I hated how it looked, and I put it on the second time and I felt so cute. And today, I probably shouldn't have sewn this weekend. Today was a really bad chronic pain day, but I did wear this dress through it and I did feel really cute and it helped me feel like more of a person today. I don't know, I just have days where it's really hard to accept my chronic pain and like I just want to fight through it and like ignore it, and I know that that doesn't ever play well. That makes it worse. Oh boy, sorry, Spooky's in the corner looking real crazy right now. She's got that like look. But yeah, when I'm in chronic pain, it's just really hard to like see the end of it or feel like a person, and I get really frustrated and then I do more than I should. It's frustrating. And putting on my disclaimer, I am not asking for your medical opinions. I was also pretty vague about what's going on with my body, but I don't want them. I have a team of doctors I really like and I really trust. I've had this chronic condition for almost 10 years. I don't want your advice, no offense. That's like my least favorite part about talking about chronic pain on this channel, is all the I know very well-intentioned people wanting to give me advice on it. As far as using this pattern again, I'm not sure that I will. This ended up working because it was such a busy pattern, but I think that like diamond pattern that like basically encompasses my whole stomach, it's just not something I super love. If I could just flatten out the band, I actually think I might like it more. So, okay, I will take it back. I'm not going to fully get rid of this pattern, but it will need major alterations for me to use it again. I do think it still has potential, and I do think this dress turned out really cute. I specifically do really love the neckline in the sleeves. Oh, another error on the neckline. You maybe saw it in the reveal, but you can still see a little peeky of the floral fabric with the black fabric, and that kind of drives me a little bit nuts, but we're gonna live with it. But I really love, from like bust up, I love this dress. So I do think I just need to kind of look at the pattern and figure out a way to keep this and just get rid of the weird faux belt thing. So I guess I probably will keep the pattern. Who am I kidding? Otherwise, I think it turned out really great. I also just think like when you sew up a ton of patterns, you're never gonna get 100% rate of loving every single pattern you make. You are sometimes just going to make things that you don't like. I think that's true whether you're using vintage or modern. So like I would just encourage you, if you make something up from a pattern and you don't think you like that pattern itself, I was gonna say, I'm gonna encourage you to declutter that as I selfishly hoard mine. You can take that advice knowing that I'm a hypocrite. The pattern has so much potential, but enough of my, I don't know, I feel like my brain's like not that focused, which I am on muscle relaxers, so that tracks. And I just took a dose before I started filming this, so I'm probably extra spacey loopy. So hopefully this was coherent. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I do think I'll really get a lot of use out of this dress. It's super comfy, and I think I will learn to forgive the diamond on my stomach. With that, as always, you can support me by giving this video a thumbs up, commenting down below. I'm sure you all are always so encouraging and lovely. You're gonna tell me, no, it doesn't look like your whole belly's a diamond, like you're a weird diamond superhero. I'm sure you're all gonna tell me that. And of course, if you are financially able to, which I understand we are in a financial crisis right now for most American and honestly international households. So if you can't financially support me, I totally understand, but I do have my Patreon linked if that is something you want to do. But yeah, I will see you next week for whatever video comes out of my brain. I post every single Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, so please subscribe to see me weekly. Bye!